not sure. You're with Julian and no information worth having on the brown note. And now a review of 12 Years a Slave. In the 1840s in America, Solomon Northup, who was a New York state-born free Negro, which means that he was either freed from being a slave, but in his case, both of his parents were freed slaves. So he was born as a free man and lived in New York where slavery had been abolished, and he was a fiddle player and a carpenter and a variety of other things, and had a young family, 2 children and a wife in New York, and was lured to Washington, D.C. in 1841 by 2 men who claimed they had a job playing in a circus for a reasonably good wage for 2 weeks if he'd come and play backing music to their show. So he went and they drugged him and sold him as a slave and swapped his papers for that of a genuine escaped slave. And he was sent to Louisiana for 12 years where he worked on plantations. And Steve McQueen, the British filmmaker, who has chosen very difficult subjects for his films. I've only seen Hunger, which was incredible, starring Michael Fassbender, who appears in all 3 of the films that McQueen has made. And Hunger was about, I think, the Bobby Sands IRA hunger striker who killed himself, starved himself to death. And it was a provocative and powerful movie. And followed that with Shame, which I haven't seen. I think that was where the focus was on sex addiction. Again, Michael Fassbender. And this time around, there's going to be some problems with pronunciations here. I think he's an English actor, but I'm not completely sure. Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is instantly recognisable. They're saying that he's somebody that has just almost been treated as a new actor, but I recognised him instantly from half a dozen different movies and also from TV programmes as well. Stars as Solomon, and he's obviously kidnapped and sold off one of these plantation shindigs, which itself is one of the most astonishingly realised moments in the movie, where they have these naked, in some cases, African males and women standing around while white posh people walk around and prod at them and look at their teeth and appendages and decide how much they're going to pay for them, which I was looking at the costs involved. It's quite a lot of money. It was sort of like $1,000 some of these people were going for in the 1850s, which must be a very big amount of money. And apparently, in the era where America's economy was burgeoning and the cotton fields were going crazy, that there was a shortage of slaves in America, and there was this astonishing practice of kidnapping free black people and actually forging their documents and selling them on as slaves. The film literally follows his biography, which was released in 1853, and became basically one of the most famous memoirs from somebody that had been a former slave. And most of the information in that biography, which was used to a great extent by abolitionists in America, has been deemed valid, historically accurate, including the fact that he ended up taking a lot of the people to trial and never won because of things like black people weren't allowed to testify in the court, which kind of ruined his case a little bit. It's an astonishingly well-shot film. I think that's the thing that surprised me most about it, is visually it's by far Steve McQueen's most arresting film. That's not been spoken about. It's always been about the acting and about the torturous nature of what happens. But the scenery, the way these slave plantations and cotton fields and these old houses and everything, and the sunlight in particular, and everything is shot stunningly. It's a really breathtaking film to look at. It is obviously a very, very challenging film to watch. There are particularly upsetting things like when they're choosing to buy Northup. In the early part of the film, they actually buy another woman as well who's got 2 young children with her, and they basically just separate them and take the girl to sell in another way and the boy to sell in another way, and the mother's obviously distraught. And what follows is a very interesting and complex portrait of slavery in the South, which involves people like a very strong performance from Benedict Cumberbatch, who's been great in everything I've seen him, as a very conflicted slave owner who, in the end, has to sell Chiwetel's character because he gets into a massive argument with a particularly racist hand who will end up killing him, so he has to sell him on to a very nasty slave plantation owner, and that's Michael Fassbender making another appearance. Everyone's gone on about Chiwetel's performance in this film, understandably, and also Lupita Nyong'o, who plays one of the younger African-American women that's sold into slavery. But Michael Fassbender is absolutely outstanding in this. He plays a very reprobate, drunken, and complex character, and I thought it was a performance of his career as well, and those three certainly do stand up. Lots of the supporting cast, Paul Giamatti, Benedict Cumberbatch, are also excellent as well. Brad Pitt appears towards the end. It's in some ways his baby, as he was one of the main producers to get the project off the ground. It's been a huge success. It's been a big box office success, which it must be one of the most hard-to-watch films that has made that much money. I'm sure it's not that far away from Passion of the Christ. It's pretty brutal stuff, and it's one of the front runners for a lot of the Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. For me, it falls short, but not by much. If I could point to what was wrong in the movie, I'd really struggle, but it's something almost holistic in the background that I didn't feel that there was necessarily more than reportage of Solomon Northup's story. I didn't feel like the director necessarily had a unifying theme or anything he was particularly trying to say. It was really just a reportage of the actual events themselves. And maybe that's because it's a biopic, but I still think if it was going to be an absolutely one of the best films ever made, he'd have something deeper to say underneath it, other than what you already know about the horrors of slavery. And I doubt that even, I guess anyone with half an imagination could probably picture half the things that happen in this film. And I don't necessarily think that it offers anything new on slavery, but it is a terrific film. It's beautifully shot, and the performance by Chiwetel is, and particularly when Michael Fassbender, sorry, I almost called him Binder, joins the fray, are really terrific, and it's just worth watching those scenes. It is a little repetitive in that score, given the necessary nature of the absolute banality and mundanity. In fact, the slave's life appears to be 99% banality and 1% unbelievable horror, and they're often very close to death, often without having done anything. And the way that there's also a variety of treatments given to these people as well, because some people are obviously totally against it, such as Brad's character towards the end. Other, like Benedict Cumberbatch's character, wants to treat everyone well, but he's still a slaver. He doesn't abuse anyone, he doesn't mistreat anyone, and he feels very conflicted about owning slaves, yet he still does. Whereas Michael Fassbender reminded me an awful lot of the character from Schindler's List, played by Ralph Fiennes. He's almost like he's outside of the world of evil, but on his own terms he's just as evil. He's like this weird sort of signifier to what's going on. So it's a brilliant film, but I don't think it deserves to win Best Picture over something like Gravity or American Hustle, which I think are all-round stronger movies. But it's such an oddball film that it may do, and I wouldn't say it would be the worst choice they've ever made. So I'm going to give 12 Years a Slave 8.5 out of 10. There you go. Now, this is